We've talked about the confluence between AI and crypto before on this channel, but it was always future tense. It was always speculative. We always had to qualify it by saying one day these things will happen. Today I realized that day was yesterday. The day has already passed when it's easier to create an arbitrary image via AI than by human artist. We've already hit that point where it's easier to let AI write a simple scene in a play or movie, or an article, or even a college essay. This has profound implications for the future of human labor and economics, and it's completely unclear what that future looks like. The one part of this that seems obvious to me is that this future AI economy is going to involve a lot more crypto and a lot less fiat. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss the recent tsunami of retail access to powerful and creative AI and what it means for crypto. More anti-consumer, anti-crypto behavior from Apple, this time targeting Coinbase, and the vice tightening around SBF, partly due to his own pride and ego. If you instantly knew that this was AI-generated art, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. This background image was entirely AI generated. It probably took me like 30 or 45 seconds to come up with a dozen words to use as a prompt for the AI. It was like one line of words. And then the AI just spit out 4 candidate images almost immediately, it seemed. I picked one of those 4 images, and then it processed that image I picked again, and then I had it process it one more time, and this is what I got. The entire thing, the entire generation of this image probably took about 5 minutes, 5 minutes flat. This was immensely more efficient than going out and trying to find any kind of pre-existing imagery like this, or somehow finding someone who could create this, or trying to create it myself. It's very evident to me that this kind of imagery generation is going to be done overwhelmingly by AI in the future. Sure, there will always be use cases for artists to create things that are aesthetically pleasing to other humans, but I think the bulk of the imagery generation like this, just, low level imagery generation, just arbitrary images, when you're trying to find or generate an arbitrary image of a specific thing, in this case, robots, this is overwhelmingly going to be done by AI. And I think this is just the first domino to fall this way. And I know there's much more powerful AI out there doing spectacular and amazing things. But what's interesting right now is that this wave of retail acceptance of the availability of AI, like, the mainstream is now, we're at this point where the mainstream is realizing that AI is actually available for pretty much everybody that has an internet connection. I mean, I didn't pay for this. This was free. And I had to wait in the queue with everybody else trying to process their images. And the whole thing still only took me 5 minutes. But this isn't just happening around imagery. Here's a post from Mark Andreessen from today. He is Mark Andreessen of A16Z fame. If you don't know how that nickname for the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz works, it's A and then 16 letters, 9 starting with the N and going to the N here, and then starting with the H in Horowitz and going to the T before the Z. You've got another 7 letters together, A, 16 letters, and then Z. He's that Mark Andreessen. But he shows here the power of OpenAI in creating a scene like you would have in a play. He says the prompt was, write a scene from a play starring a New York Times journalist and a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur. They are arguing about free speech, and each passionately asserts the view associated with his profession and social circle. This is probably a discussion that Mark Andreessen has actually seen play out in real life multiple times. And as you look through it, you realize that the AI has created dialogue seemingly between two humans that's probably about as good as any human would create. It lays out the scene. A trendy cafe in San Francisco, a New York Times journalist and a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur sit across from each other at a small table, both looking heated and passionate. Listen, I understand that free speech is important to you and your industry, but there's a difference between free speech and hate speech. We can't just let people say whatever they want without consequences. That's the journalist. The entrepreneur says, but that's exactly what free speech is about. The whole point is to allow people to express themselves without fear of retribution. We can't start censoring speech just because we don't like what someone has to say. And the conversation goes on and on for about a page. I have no idea how long it took the AI to generate this, but probably extremely quickly. And this is pretty convincing. Only a few years ago, if you had shown me this, I would assume for sure that some human wrote this as part of a screenplay or something like that. Whenever you see these kinds of displays of the powers of AI, there's always this faction of very passionate people who want to discredit it. For some reason, they very passionately want to prove that it's not very creative or it's not very remarkable in any way. That, in the case of text like this, that it's just regurgitated shards of other conversations, and there's nothing human like about the combination of those shards. It's always something along those lines, that it's too algorithmic, it's not actually creative in any way, it couldn't possibly replace human creativity. But the fact of the matter is, when you read through this could pretty easily be dialogue in like a Netflix movie. Currently available AI might even be more potent when it comes to nonfiction. Here is another OpenAI example. The prompt was, can you write me a 4-paragraph academic essay comparing and contrasting the theories of nationalism of Benedict Anderson and Ernest Gellner? And sure enough, it kicked out this essay, which looks pretty good. The poster here says, playing with OpenAI's new chatbot is mind-blowing. We're witnessing the death of the college essay in real time. Here's the response to a prompt from one of my 200-level history classes at Amherst. Solid A work in 10 seconds. Are you telling me that college students aren't going to use this? How are professors even going to deal with this? I mean, plagiarism, in the case of plagiarism, at least they were talking about, some previously existing source matter that was copied. With these AI produced essays, I mean, what are professors even going to do with this? And of course, if publicly available AI can already kick out an academic essay like this, how long can normal human journalism resist AI coming into their space? I mean, you can imagine a whole media outlet existing where they feed a prompt like this into AI, just, identifying whatever is the important news of the day. And then the AI going out and crawling all of the other media outlets, collecting all the information, and then constructing a story based on all the pertinent details. I mean, if OpenAI produced this essay in 10 seconds, I mean, how gigantic could that media outlet be? And even if the work is only, 70% as good, 90% as good, 80% as good as a human, they're going to be able to cover, vastly more news in a day than an actual human run media outlet. And the costs will be, a sliver of what an actual human run media outlet would be. I mean, just think about what social media did to journalism just in the last decade. Social media took so much of the earning potential out of regular media that all of the media outlets kind of had to turn to yellow journalism. Instead of being able to neutrally report the news and still make enough money to get by, all of a sudden they had to sort of incite rage and polarize everyone with every single headline just in order to get enough clicks to get the requisite number of eyeballs on their media outlets. That was just social media. Can you imagine what AI is going to do to journalism? Here's a poster that even claims it's easier to have OpenAI write an essay for you than it is to Google the subject matter and try to find a previously existing essay. You can see here the prompt he gave it was write a 4-paragraph essay comparing the political ideologies of Sam Altman, Balaji Srinivasan, and Andrew Yang. This could be ushering in a brand new era of bespoke literature, which could be nonfiction or fiction. You notice the theme here, and I think this poster sums it up well. Feels like the world just sped up overnight. Previously, if you wanted to somehow pay someone to produce this essay, even just a short 4-paragraph essay, comparing the ideologies of these 3 individuals, pretty tough to figure out who to have write that, to tell them exactly what you want, wait for them to research it and then write it and deliver it to you. But with AI, this was probably produced in a matter of seconds. Speed is the theme that keeps coming through. There are all kinds of qualitative arguments you could make about how, an expert on political ideology of individuals like this probably could have done a slightly better job, but they could not have done a better job in the same amount of time. The big difference is the speed thing. And if the AI can produce the same content in, maybe not even the same content, but let's say content that's 60% is good, 80% is good, 90% is good, whatever it is. And if it does it in a tiny fraction of the amount of time, I think that's going to mean that the majority of that type of content, whatever it is, the majority of that content in the future is going to be produced by AI, and it's going to have some value. There's some value in being able to read a concise comparison of the political ideologies of these 3 individuals and have that produced in just a few seconds. People are going to be willing to pay for this, and there's probably going to be a lot of volume of those types of transactions. And given that speed is the big theme here, I don't think it's likely that those transactions are going to be happening in fiat. I think it's much more likely these transactions will be happening in crypto. I do believe that crypto will be the currency of future AI economies, not fiat. You could argue that it won't be the kinds of crypto we want it to be. Instead, that it'll be central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. But I don't think so. I mean, of course, that will happen too. But I don't think this AI economy will be the sole domain of CBDCs. I think it'll be way too tempting for central banks, and there will be pervasive elements of surveillance and behavioral economics embedded in those CBDCs to such an extent that a good portion of this economy will go to real crypto. So, if the currency of the AI economy is going to be crypto and not fiat and won't be entirely consumed by CBDCs, what blockchain do you pick to get a leg up on the competition? Maybe you pick Cardano because it already has an AI devoted ecosystem from Professor Ben Gortzel building on top of it called SingularityNet. Speaking of gigantic centralized entities trying to control our behavior through technology, we got news of more anti-consumer, anti-crypto activity from Apple. Coinbase had this to report. You might have noticed you can't send NFTs on Coinbase Wallet iOS anymore. This is because Apple blocked our last app release until we disabled the feature. If you watch this channel, you're probably already guessing what this is about. Apple's claim is that the gas fees required to send NFTs need to be paid through their in-app purchase system so that they can collect 30% of the gas fee. Yes, it's Apple's infamous 30% tax on the internet. And they're going not just after transactions, to purchase the NFTs, but the actual gas fees to send the NFTs. They want their 30% of that too. Coinbase says, for anyone who understands how NFTs and blockchains work, this is clearly not possible. Apple's proprietary in-app purchase system does not support crypto, so we couldn't comply even if we tried. This is akin to Apple trying to take a cut of fees for every email that gets sent over open internet protocols. The biggest impact from this policy change is on iPhone users that own NFTs. If you hold an NFT in a wallet on an iPhone, Apple just made it a lot harder to transfer that NFT to other wallets or gift it to friends or family. Simply put, Apple has introduced new policies to protect their profits at the expense of consumer investment in NFTs and developer innovation across the crypto ecosystem. We hope this is an oversight on Apple's behalf. See, they're trying to be diplomatic here. We hope this is an oversight on Apple's behalf and an inflection point for further conversations within the ecosystem. This is anti-consumer. And it does show that Apple doesn't really understand how blockchains work. If they understood, they wouldn't go after gas fees on NFTs. This is a ridiculous place for them to pursue their 30%. Sadly, according to Brian Armstrong, this is not an isolated incident. He says it's just a good example of the kinds of discussions we have with Apple on a monthly basis to deal with their App Store monopoly. It's gotten pretty absurd at times. You may have noticed that the noose keeps tightening around SBF's neck. Granted, it offends the sensibilities that he's not already in handcuffs, but it does seem like the noose is tightening. Here's a post about why. The FTX terms of service at 8.2.6 are very clear. All digital assets were to be held in user accounts and not be used by FTX for any purpose. For example, speculative investments. There's no wiggle room. It's what I would call a big problem for them. This is very different than the situation with some other entities. The same poster points out BlockFi, on the other hand, was very clear in its terms of service that it was not custodian or fiduciary of any customer assets. And that, in legal fallout terms, could be the difference between a money problem and a prison problem. With every passing day, it's getting harder and harder to find anybody who didn't receive political donations from SBF who doesn't use the word fraud when they're talking about what happened with FTX. In fact, SBF has been in a series of interviews and this gigantic Twitter space today. Here you can see that almost 250,000 people tuned in to this single Twitter space, which was super chaotic and disorganized. And after SBF jumped off, even the speakers on the panel who were supposed to be interrogating him and giving him tough questions kind of turned on each other, started blaming each other for why they were unable to sort of corner SBF and ask him the really hard questions. Definitely, this Twitter space did not go, I think, the way that a lot of the speakers wanted it to go. But there were some people listening who had some choice words to describe SBF. Jesse Powell says SBF is completely full of it about how margin trading works. He's saying that the whole exchange operated on a net account equity model and anybody could borrow anything in any amount from client funds or from nowhere. That's not how it should work. It all added up if you counted negative balances as 100% recoverable. That's a quote he's attributing there. He says, this doesn't make any sense. No, dude. Borrowing 10,000 BTC from client balances versus FTT, of course, being the token of FTX, versus FTT at mark to market is not just bad risk management. It is obfuscated fraud. The only difference between SBF and Madoff is Madoff didn't have a token. I think a lot of us, myself included, strongly agree with this sentiment. There are a lot of politicians in Washington whose campaigns received a lot of money from SBF who don't want their names dragged through the mud, but the wrongdoing here is just too massive and it's becoming far too clear to everyone. Yesterday, I saw this post. To be honest, I think the biggest reason DAOs have struggled is because they don't pay their community. We just assumed that owning tokens would be sufficient to incentivize people to build out a project's value. It's not. Communities still need to be paid to govern and build. And this reminded me of a Cardano rumor rundown from about a year and a half ago. In a two-part series, episodes 76 and 77, I argued not that DAOs should be this sort of governance appendage that's kind of attached to the protocols. I argued that we should go further, that DAOs should replace corporations. I went into a lot more detail on that in these two videos, but basically, I think what we've got with modern corporations is this kind of neo lords and peasants situation, which is not good for the lords or the peasants really, because in modern corporations, you've got a bunch of investors and the C-level executives, and largely they're the ones who have a stake in the enterprise. Sure, some crumbs kind of filter down to the levels below, maybe the managers and the middle managers, they've got a bunch of options, and maybe the rank and file employees get, some scant number of options. But largely, the rank and file employees are wage slaves. They're not really working because they have a stake in the enterprise. They're just working because they get paid X amount of dollars per year, X amount of dollars per hour. This is the wrong incentive system. You want, in a business enterprise, you want everybody's incentives to be aligned. You don't want the lords to be the only ones with an incentive for the organization to thrive, and this underclass of people who are really just wage slaves with no incentive to do anything beyond just making sure they don't get fired. I believe this is where this quiet quitting phenomenon comes from. Of course, it's illogical. If you don't have a stake in the enterprise, why would you do anything beyond trying not to get fired? Instead of this lords and peasants system, we could have a DAO, and you can have all the same roles if you want. You can still have a CEO and a CMO and a CFO and managers and middle managers and VPs and rank and file employees, all those things. But instead of this dual system where some people have a stake in the enterprise, equity in the enterprise, and everybody else is just a wage slave, instead, everybody has tokens. And maybe they have an amount of tokens, that's equivalent to their role in the company. You could still have founders of these companies and they have the vast amount of tokens. But when it comes to rank and file employees, instead of them being wage slaves, they get a certain number of tokens that corresponds to their role. Hey, you're the lowest level employee of the company, but instead of being a wage slave, you get X number of tokens. And X number of tokens are going to entitle you to X percentage of the company's profit. Then all of a sudden, everyone's interests are aligned. This is better for the lords and the peasants, only you'll no longer have that horrible distinction. All of a sudden, everybody has a stake in the enterprise. I could be completely wrong, but I think this is a much better use of DAOs than this whole governance tokens and governance having value by virtue of its ability to accomplish fee switching thing we've got going on. In any case, I hope you're getting ready for a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.